asked if he'd have to stay there at all, and she said, "No, they're just, going to run an MRI and some tests, just to make sure his head's okay," because she noticed that he kept getting larger than normal since birth. So my children's father took him to the children's hospital, and I was at home with my other son. And he called me and he said they found fluid in his head, and they're trying to say that someone shook him. And we were just both shocked, and we're like, "There's no way, that anyone hurt our son at all." And so I went to the children's hospital and I spoke with a pediatric neurosurgeon, and I told him, my son has never been hurt in any way. Can this be something else, such as a medical condition? And he said, yes, but since he's a baby and can't talk, we're just going to go with abuse, and walked away.
So when you mention abuse, did they think that this was something that maybe he experienced at your hands, or was it maybe something more general?
Well, they assumed that since my children's father took him to the children's hospital, that he was the last person with him, that he had to have hurt him in some way. So they wrongfully investigated him for child abuse, and they made him leave the hospital. My son was laying there in the hospital bed, and he had to have neurological surgery. As a surgery to have a VP shunt, an external VP shunt placed to drain the fluid out of his head. So he had that surgery and then had to stay in the hospital for about 5 days. And a few weeks after that, we went back for an MRI to make sure the fluid was okay. And they said that the fluid had reaccumulated, and he had a chronic condition. And that right there um, made me concerned, because I was like, okay, I asked the doctors, what type of condition is this? Since you're saying it's a chronic condition, they just said they don't know.
I know there's times here in Canada that the abuse or the alleged or even the thought of a child going through it is so serious. And a lot of people take it maybe a little bit to the extreme where they will see any indication, at least in their mind, that something is going wrong. But in a lot of times, I would say that's probably not the case because I think we have this innate, feeling, or at least response to protect children at all costs, right? If we see a little scratch, if we see unhappiness, things of that nature, we want to make sure that the child is okay. And sometimes instead of asking questions or maybe trying to understand what has happened, we automatically will jump to conclusions and say that, hey, it has to be this because of whatever signs that we think we saw instead of maybe what's reality. Could it have been maybe there was a confusion between people just misinterpreting what they saw and automatically becoming accusatory instead of becoming understanding?
Well, what's confusing is they have a whole care team, which is a whole group of doctors that specialize in child abuse. They made my son undergo like so much testing that was not necessary, like MRIs and so much radiation that they subjected him to, that they didn't need to, because it seemed like they're more focused on finding abuse than treating my son for a medical condition. And I think that sometimes the doctors may lean way towards the side of caution, so that if they do miss something, they're not held accountable. But when that happens, they don't realize how much it drastically affects the lives of the children and the parents and the family.
How has this situation impacted you and everyone involved, knowing that there's this situation hanging over your head, and as it starts to maybe gain a little bit of momentum, maybe starting to wear on the family involved?
We're just in complete shock. Here we were taking our child to a children's hospital and to doctors, because he wasn't feeling well before. And then, out of precaution, his pediatrician wanted us to take him to the hospital to have images taken just to make sure he's okay. But, as a parent, you're doing the best you can to take care of your child, and taking them to get medical care and then it gets turned around on you for child, you're investigated for child abuse. It's just like you're in complete shock and disbelief. Like you can't even believe this is happening. And the demeanor of the doctors and the nurses and the staff at the hospital, they're just treating us like we're these horrible child abusers when that wasn't even the case at all.
I don't have children. I couldn't imagine going into a hospital with someone that I care for, a life that I created, right? You're giving, it's literally and metaphorically a piece of you, and you're bringing them because you're concerned, you're caring, and then it goes from the care to now, wait a minute, instead of you being protective of your child going through this, now there's other people that want to protect your child from you.
Yes.
Like when you look at how quickly that has turned around, how did it make you feel not only as a parent, but as a person?
I was just completely shocked and surprised because I mean, it's like you're completely innocent and you know nothing, you did nothing wrong, and you try to explain that so many times to so many different people and no one listens. No one listens to anything that you're saying, and it's just so frustrating and heartbreaking to be investigated for something so horrific when that would have never happened. And I definitely understand where you're coming from. Families have people have contacted me that they don't have children, but they have family and friends that have children. And if you could imagine like this happening to your niece, your nephew, your friend's children, it's completely heartbreaking because they're reaching out to me for some type of help. Like, how did you get through this situation? You know, that person is crying because they're seeing their family and their friends' children go through this. It affects like so many people that are around the family. You know, your immediate family and your friends, they're really affected by it as well.
How are you getting through this situation currently?
Honestly, through prayer and faith and support from my family and friends, and just trying to stay strong and just trying to help turn our pain into purpose to try to help other people that are going through a similar situation and to raise the awareness so that other people can also find the strength to stay strong and know that they're not alone.
I've I don't know if I don't know if I share this, but I took law in school, and there's like a number of case studies that we had to do, and sometimes you'll come across, let's say, people who were serial killers or people who were abusive to animals or even abusive to children, and then you begin to characterize certain people based on these behaviors because they have all of it exhibited a certain personality type, right, or certain characteristics of that person. And a lot of times they came across as, let's say, maybe charming. They came across as, the old joke like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, where in public they're this perfect person, right? Like the envy of the town, but behind closed doors, it's a totally different story, and many times it's like a dark story. So I can understand where people were trying to be protective of each other because there's laws in certain places, and no one is more vulnerable than a child. But when I look at the parents that I deal with, and many of them have the love of their child, right? Like they love their child more than anything in this world. They love their child more than life. I couldn't
Mhm.
imagine one of them coming to me and saying, Terrain, I went to the doctor just for a checkup because, there's something that I noticed with my child. And now I'm being accused of this. Now my life is upside down. And I think maybe one of the biggest fears outside of maybe losing their child over something that isn't necessarily their fault is probably the judgment in the courts of public opinion,
Mhm.
right? As this has been happening to you and those involved in your family, have you noticed any shift maybe in how people are interacting with you or viewing you as you go through this?
Well, the great thing is that our family and our friends know us very well. And, you know, since we're children. And my cousin actually called me. She is an attorney in Los Angeles. And she said, I know that you, and Jason, their father, would never hurt your children. You hire your own attorneys and you fight this. And I'm so thankful that she told me that, because in this situation, you have no idea what to do. You're just completely shocked and caught off guard. Like, how do you get through this situation? You're completely devastated that your child is laying in a hospital bed. Your baby, like my son was only 5 months old and he had to have neurological surgery. And the thing is, there was zero evidence of any child abuse. And I just knew in my heart that my son was never hurt in any way. And CPS actually showed up at the hospital, and they told me, if you don't sign the safety plan, I will contact the DA and I will have your children taken from you right now. So we felt that we were coerced and forced to sign that safety plan. They made my children's father, leave the hospital. I had to be supervised with my children at all times. And after the safety plan had expired after 30 days, there was zero contact from CPS at all. I told my attorney at the time that we had a planned visit to go visit family in Oklahoma. And he said, okay, since the safety plan is expired, just, still follow what it says, and I'll reach out to CPS and let them know that you're going to go visit family. Um, while I was in Oklahoma, I also took my son to a second opinion to get a second opinion at a children's hospital. And while they were seeing my son, they actually told me, they said, CPS Texas is calling us and they're telling us to take your children from you right now, that they're in immediate danger. And I told them, my son is not hurt in any way. They did an exam. They said he was completely fine. And they reached out to CPS Oklahoma, where we were visiting our family. And CPS Oklahoma did their own investigation. And she said that CPS Texas is saying that your children are in immediate danger. They're telling me to take them from you right now. So she did her own investigation for about 3 hours. She met her whole family that was with us. She met my children and looked at the medical records, saw that I was taking my son to see doctors. And she said, I deem your children safe. I will not take them from you. And CPS just CPS Texas ignored what they said. And they illegally crossed state lines and took my children from me.
Was this something that they thought was maybe more so on the father of the children, or is it more so you, or was it like both being accused of doing this?
They actually wrongfully charged their father with 2 serious felonies of injury to a child. And he was in complete shock because, there's no evidence of any child abuse. He didn't do anything wrong. He had a top secret government and military security clearance. And we both have clean backgrounds. And this really ruined our lives. Like, he lost his job because he was traveling. He had to travel to different military bases and he couldn't continue to do that. So he lost his job, lost his career, lost his top secret clearance. They put him on house arrest for a month, and they treated him like a horrible criminal when he was in fact innocent.